Today we're going to check out Legends summarized by Overly Sarcastic Productions. This is going to be the 9 realms. I only know Norse mythology from, admittedly, a handful of videos Overly Sarcastic Productions have done, and the Marvel Thor movies. Yeah, so I'm assuming everything I know is completely useless. That said, it's Overly Sarcastic Productions, and whenever they've done previous things about anything Norse, it's been really freaking cool. Which is why after this, I'm probably going to check out a bunch of whole miscellaneous myths, because they're just apparently really good and all there, and I just was on the wrong playlist for all the really cool stuff, as opposed to this playlist with other really cool stuff. I know, it's decision overload, I'm aware. More importantly, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up, and let's get started.
If there's one thing I've learned from my time on the internet, it's that people love it.
That is a very dangerous way to start anything. Anything on the internet. If there's one thing I've learned from my time on the internet, is never going to be good in context. I'm assuming that's not where they're going, but wow, that is a very loaded way to start. Oh my God.
When things are clearly categorized. But as an exciting twist on the process, everybody disagrees on what categories they specifically like.
Yep.
In reality, basically everything is fluid and flexible, and every single method of strict delineation ever created has struggled with edge cases and gray areas and the beautiful diversity of human experience, and some people getting way...
Oopsie, real life is complicated. My God, I was unaware. If only that was not a joke and it was real. So much easier.
Way too into fitting everybody in nice little boxes with nice little rules and punishing anyone who steps over their personal favorite line. But if strict delineation is a losing battle doomed to failure, why do we keep trying it so much? Well, broad-scale categorization can still be useful. Just because there's no such thing as a fish, biologically speaking, doesn't mean it's not...
What? That's because all life evolved out of water. Reptiles, mammals, birds, even dinosaurs all came from something that we would say look pretty much like a fish, and there's so much more. Someone actually wrote all life evolved out of water. That is so stupid. Like, I don't even care to read the rest of it. It's just, I'm sorry, this is like finding out about flat earthers for the first time. It's like, wow, they can't be that stupid. 5 minutes later, oh my God, they're actually that stupid. I know they're putting this in as a joke. It's like, fish aren't real. It's like the people who say pigeons aren't real, except this one looks like someone actually wrote out an entire thing. This is for Tech Insider. The fact that there's attribution here makes this so much worse. Like right up there with the Wikipedia AI articles that said, no, actually not Wikipedia, sorry. I think it was Apple articles that said, hey, fish, what is a fish in seafood? Anything that a person might eat considered seafood is seafood. Those are real articles that actually had to be removed because someone paid money to it. That's a completely different can of worms. But yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm a little blown away by the stupid right here. There's someone who actually believes this probably.
Not good to have a word for swimming things with fins and gills. But our propensity for categorization goes far beyond simple practicality, and in the face of that kind of overwhelming evidence, the answer appears to be simple. We must just really like doing it. We like sorting things. We like it when things have rules that can be easily summarized, and we like it when someone or something belonging to a group tells you a set of reliable things about them. That ranges from semi-tangible but still complicated things like country, heritage, gender, and orientation, all the way out to stuff like star signs, Myers-Briggs types, and Hogwarts houses.
I'm sorry. Hogwarts houses. Raven, Hufflepuff, those other guys who, yeah. Would that make the one with the dragon accessory Slytherin then? Yeah, Merrick would know them. Well played, Overly Sarcastic Productions. Well played.
The fact that this kind of easy-breezy boxing transforms into bad things like stereotyping almost immediately is another sign that the only reason we would possibly keep reinventing this doomed endeavor is because we just like it. Fitting everyone into nice little boxes is bad and restrictive. Getting mad when people don't fit in the box you put them in is also bad. But finding a box you like...
Oh my God. That's just adorable. I hope it's a real kitty and not a toy because they have the little cat box. Unless someone's actually just selling boxes explicitly for cats. Is it a real cat or just a hyper-realistic cat? I'm going to say it's real because it's cuter that way. I like kitties. I'm not regretting anything here.
Is wonderful. And while there's probably a very long and interesting conversation to be had about that, we're not here to unpack the psychology of if I fits, I sits. We are here for legends.
I'm calling
and
it
in
that
the
way
space
now.
of mythology, where so little is set in stone and everything is fluid and flexible and prone to constant reinvention and cultural drift,
That's
it
probably
is
why
so
there's the question
refreshing
mark.
to have something as categorically ironclad as the 9 realms of Norse
for it.
mythology. Referenced repeatedly by all of our surviving sources, all 2 of them that is, it's constantly...
Wait, there's only 2? That's... I mean, there's so many sources for so many other things, even if it's just word of mouth and putting together things, like on the Greek side. But if there's only 2 here, how much of the entire mythology is just missing then? Is there even an estimate of that? Or there's probably people whose entire jobs in a literary profession in a collegiate course is to go and try to examine archaeological digs to see if they can find literary references written in stone or clay tablets and see if they're preserved. Admittedly, that sounds like an absolutely amazing job, and I'm kind of jealous.
Reinforced that the world of Norse mythology is actually 9 worlds of magic and wonder, beautifully subdivided with clear, solid identities. And there's 9 of them. A nice, strong, square number with enough room for exciting variety, but not so many that they all start blending together. And it'll...
I love how she's building up the 2 different points here. The first one is, we have boxes. The boxes don't work. Followed by, and here we have boxes. They're clean cut, perfect, and we know the outcome to this punchline is going to be, and nope. Hell, it's right in the title with the question mark. I just don't know how to get there because I don't know nearly enough about Norse mythology.
It'll be so fun to run down a nice, clear, beautiful, clickbait-friendly, numbered list of all 9 of them, from the familiar world of Midgard to the high halls of the gods in Asgard to the frozen realm of the giants in Jotunheim to the... What? Ooh.
What?
Okay, well, bad news, everyone. Turns out the 9 realms are actually the most frustratingly vague concept to ever claim a strict numerical delineation, and everyone is mad about it. The Eddas call them the 9 worlds plenty, but they never actually list what those 9 worlds are, and nobody's more frustrated.
Wait, so they're said 9 worlds plenty, but they don't actually... It's kind of weird that there's actually 9 planets in the solar system. Fuck you, Pluto's a planet.
By this than the poor sods translating those Eddas, whose footnotes are full of barely concealed rage and lamentation at those dang...
They put footnotes in there. I need to read that. What was the barely concealed rage? And presumably the dwarfs, perhaps not note, but the 9th world is uncertain. This girl symbolized universe. Grisma describe the length and oh my god, they're actually just. If you ever wanted to put an emoji in text before, this probably fits.
Those dang inconsiderate scribes and their completely unnecessary coyness. So today, let's unpack the, like 5 realms tops that are actually pretty well established.
Huh.
And then as many other realms as we can find evidence for, I guess. I really thought this was going to be a short one. Welcome to Helheim, folks.
Helheim? Oh, one of the actual layers. Huh. I thought there would just be like way too many and they just set them down to 9. But I guess it's the exact opposite problem because there's so much missing source material. That would actually be the indication that there is missing source material, not that this is all there is and they just kind of pass it around. That's actually really fascinating. Sorry. Things like this indicate we have other things we've talked about, but we're not going to bring them up because it's so obvious that everyone knows it. Except thousands of years later, no one knows it anymore. Or hundreds or tens of hundreds. That would be thousands still. I have no idea how old Norse mythology is either, now that I think about it. These are things I should probably look up. I'd enjoy that. But also I get stuck on wiki walking at that point, and I would like to not lose another 3 days in a row.
Now, the fun thing about Norse mythology compared to most other mythologies I cover is that we have almost nothing to work off of, which means the scholarship about it gets incredibly opaque very quickly. Because the field has absolutely no pre-Christian written sources to work off of, once you exhaust the poetic and prose edda, you're left with theoretically historical sagas, medieval accounts written by...
Wait, the Saga of Airier is one of the only things that even mentions... Because it mentions the period, so it has some of it. So literally, this is just the equivalent of saying, we have the fan fiction as the Eddas, and then the referential works that don't actually touch on it, but use them as touchstones for the audience, as in the Saga of Airier. This would be like trying to understand Harry Potter through My Immortal. I hate everything about this line of thought, and that it technically might be accurate for all we know.
By monks that had a tendency to at least flirt with the idea of actively trying to discredit the once living religion, and whatever meaning you can conspiracy board out of the completely separate field of linguistics. At this point, Norse studies is basically a centuries-old shouting match where everyone is constantly subtweeting each other about controversies that are completely incomprehensible if you haven't done minimum 50 hours of required dense academic reading and double-check the biographies of every writer to make sure they weren't literal Nazis.
Collaborate with Nazis during World War II. Wow. Yeah. Because the Nazis had a very large fascination in mythologies and anything magical. So looking into Norse mythology, because it was white Anglo-Saxon, even though it wasn't, it was Viking, which I don't think was Anglo-Saxon. But who cares about actual details if it fits what they want to look into to prove that we are the greatest? Even though, this is actually a bit of a call out. The thing about literary analysis, it's a bunch of people shouting at each other about random things they made up that think they believe are right. Not that they believe are right, that they think they believe are right, until they're convinced otherwise by someone shouting louder. It is literally just thinking like, hey, I have an idea. Maybe it means this, and everyone who could disagree with me on principle is probably dead by now due to literally minimum of 100 years. Then there's the people who do more frequent and just say, no one can disagree with me because I'm going to ignore you. Fuck up. I know what I said. It's completely accurate. That's actually how literary scholarship works in many cases. It's usually not put that way, but it functions that way.
This is super fun for me because it means I am constantly getting yelled at. But the good news is the 9 realms is such a giant mess that there is literally no way for me to avoid that outcome anyway. For every realm I mentioned in this video, I can guarantee there are at least a dozen papers about why it's probably completely imaginary and the poem it's name dropped in was a forgery written by the ghost of Tacitus, and a dozen more essays about why those essayists are stupid and wrong. It's gotta be so fun to be an expert in this field because you can phrase everything you publish in the form of an actually. Anyway, let's dive in by getting the
I mean, admittedly, they also just described why I went into being an English major. It is actually quite fun. It's stupid. It's infuriating, but it's kind of fun.
Easy one out of the way.
Midgard.
Midgard, literally meaning Middle Earth, oh, that's clever, is the world of humans.
In hindsight, that should have been obvious. But I still wasn't aware of that, and I'm judging myself for that.
In the Poetic Edda, specifically the Völuspá, Midgard is formed from Ymir's corpse by the sons of Bur, Odin and his brothers. And in the Prose Edda, specifically the Ylfaginning, a few more details are given.
Name.
For starters, Midgard is created in the Ginnunga Gap, a void that existed between the fiery realm of Muspelheim and the frigid world of Niflheim. When the temperatures clash, it causes the giant Ymir to form, presumably out of some version of precipitation, at which point he is killed and his body parts are snapped into all kinds of exciting new
Oopsie, no good way to draw that one. If they did Osiris, they probably had to practice that to see what YouTube would actually... Did she do Osiris and they actually found out that YouTube won't allow them to do that? I have to double check.
shapes. While it might make sense to think of Midgard as the whole world, the Prose Edda actually implies that this is untrue. Midgard is described as a fortified region that the gods used Ymir's eyebrows to craft as a wall against the giants.
Wait, so Middle Earth was literally eyebrow defenses. They literally just raised an eyebrow to stop the giants from going. Oh my, I don't even. They said that the entire planet of Midgard, where everyone doing anything would be, aware of it. Like, people who actually do this religion. The equivalent of Midgard is doing this. Oh my God.
Indicating that Midgard is a region of the world of men and not technically the whole thing. But these things are shaky, and especially in a field as linguistically wacky as poetry, where words get used outside their definition all the time just because they rhyme or scan, it'd be ridiculous to get all weirdly nitpicky about semantics.
And that's not even when you consider the entire Shakespeare aspect, which isn't a very big part here because Shakespeare is not during this time period. But doing what he did and just saying, I don't have a word that fits here. I'm going to make something up and use it consistently in such a way that people think it's real. And since they don't always have a very high complex understanding, they're going to assume I know a word they don't, and they're just going to pick it up. That happens so many times. There's actually lists of words Shakespeare made up because he didn't have something that fit and just wanted something. And then it worked and it got carried on.
Anyway, unsurprisingly, most of the mythos doesn't really describe Midgard in detail, presumably because it didn't have to, as the audience was expected to already live there. But as we go farther afield, things get a little more interesting. the realm of the Aesir and the high halls of the gods.
Ooh.
Asgard is mentioned at several points in the Poetic Edda as the home of the gods. When Thor's hammer is stolen, it is said that if they fail to retrieve it, the giants will come live in Asgard.
Huh. I wonder why it says Asgarth here, but we always have it as a hard D at the end. Maybe it was a pronunciation thing. Don't know.
And take their jobs and stuff. Volspa attests that Asgard is damaged during the war with the Vanir and subsequently rebuilt. It's a fortified realm that weathers a decent amount of conflict, and it's mentioned enough times that it's quite clear that the realm of the gods is separate and distinct from the world of regular humans. So that's good. We're up to 2 realms confirmed as probably being part of the 9 realms. Now, that said, the word Asgard is actually a fairly rare occurrence in the Poetic Edda. The Grímnismál lists several locations that are specific to individual gods, as if they're realms of their own within the realm of the gods, but the area they live in overall is not named. Also, just as a fun little hint of the nightmare to come, alongside all those specific subrealms like Thor's Hall and Valhalla and Folkvanger and a whole bunch of other gods' homes and important...
Valhalla would be the Valiant Hall, wouldn't it? I mean, that's just in English, and this is not the spoken language at the time, but yeah. Oh, this is... I can see really quickly why this would go crazy, because if they're treating Valhalla as less a destination and more of a specific location within a larger location, it makes a lot of sense. And if they did that with everyone, this very much feels like the information we're working off isn't so much even the fan fiction. It's like a reference to Shakespeare and leaving it at that. If everything I said in this video about Shakespeare was the only record of Shakespeare, it would be this level of intimacy right now. Not intimacy, information. Although it could be intimacy for all we know, because maybe that's what Shakespeare had. I mean, we who have read it know that. Anyone who's just hearing me say we who have read it know it would then believe, did it? Is he making a joke? I don't know. That guy's an idiot. Why would they say that? It's drawing conclusions based on information that is not complete. It's why you can do literary analysis on old books in a completely different way, because a lot of books that are written contemporary are very much relying on contemporary information that people reading it would just have due to knowing context clues already. It's why pop culture references don't always work in the future, because you don't explain why some random person who did some random thing is a really funny reference, because you don't know what the fuck is being said. But at the time period, it's like, oh yeah, hey, remember that time with Taylor Swift? And yeah, they started a riot. Too soon? No, I don't think she did, so it's probably not too soon. Now, if I said a few other people, good thing she didn't give out a PS5, though. But it's like, kind of like that. That is a random aside that means nothing if you didn't have specific context to what I'm saying. We're very much missing all the context, and they're just skipping over it because it's too obvious to write. We're not even into this and already seeing exactly the problem here, and it's actually fascinating. I love this kind of stuff.
Divine areas, Alfheim, the realm of the elves, is put right alongside them, strongly indicating that Alfheim is part of Asgard rather than a realm in its own right, which sucks because Alfheim is one of the regular shortlisters for the 9 realms, along with its dark counterpart Svartalfheim, so our dang rigorous scholarly efforts have already scuttled our chances of making an even 9 out of this mess by cutting out 2 typical shoo-ins right out the gate. Either Alfheim isn't its own world, or every single sublet and cul-de-sac in Asgard is its own realm, which is way more than 9. The pros.
And that's not even considering the fact that they could have just been mistranslated or misunderstood. And what they called realms could have been countries as opposed to planets, which we would say, because when you say a realm, we think, you know, its own plane, its own planet, its own universe, its own galaxy, its own island, maybe, as opposed to, well, here's the kingdom of this, here's the kingdom of that, and they have the other things in there, but we're going to call them realms because this is the realm of the king, which is actually a way to use that word, but that's still in English, and this is not the original language. I don't think it's the original language. Yeah, because they were translated. Yeah, okay. I don't know the original one.
Zeta has a lot more details about Asgard, but unfortunately they are wildly untrustworthy. For one thing, Snorri Sturluson comes out swinging with the claim that Asgard is literally Troy, like Trojan War Troy, which is always a bad start. The Gylfaginning again lists several key locations in Asgard, or quote-unquote heaven, including Alfheim again, but Snorri goes out of his way to specify that only light elves inhabit that realm, and their dark elf counterparts live underground. This is, as far as I can tell, the first and only source for the idea that elves come in 2 flavors. One
which is even weirder, because I thought the concept of an elf at this time wasn't like this. It was small. Like elves in Santa Claus's workshop level elf is kind of what you expect. Because wasn't Tolkien the one who went full on tall, majestic. Huh. I don't know. I'm also not even going to bring in the Irish she in this thing because that's a whole other can of worms.
One luminous and heavenly, the other dark and ugly, unless you subscribe to the idea that dark elf is literally just another term for dwarf, which is a completely different can of worms. And from the way Snorri describes them, the strong vibe is that light elves are basically literal Christian angels. Odin then goes on to say that there are two more heavens, even heavenier than theirs, called Andlanger and Vidblain, that are so heaveny that only light elves currently live there, and once Ragnarok comes and wipes the slate clean, the light elves will take over running the place. And if you believe any of that was a pre-Christian concept, I got a Bifrost to sell. The third.
So the only pre-Christian concepts I saw shoehorned in were previously about how, I think it was, I forgot his name. The one god who's dead. Frigg's brother. Not Frigg's brother. There's so many gods that are hard to remember sometimes. But the one god that was for beauty and everyone loved him and Loki fucked around and he killed him. I want to say Torbjorn, but I'm pretty sure that's a completely different franchise. And he would come back, and there was like the illusions, like, "Hey, yeah, it's definitely Jesus." After that, yeah, he's there, yeah. I didn't realize it went even deeper than that, and it was much more persistent, though.
Third and final, almost certainly one of the 9 realms, is the world of the giants, Jotunheim. Although if you want to nitpick, and really who doesn't, Jotunheim is almost always Jotunheimar, which is plural, making it the giant realms, because we weren't already dealing with enough. The Poetic Edda references it repeatedly as the home to many giants. The 3 giant maidens in the Vospa that convinced the gods to create the dwarves traveled out of Jotunheim to do it. Freyr.
Wait, the giants created the dwarves, or convinced the gods to make them? That's not something I was expecting, especially if you subscribe to the idea that the dark elves were the dwarves as well.
Spies on a woman in Jotunheim in the Skirnismal. And of course, when Thor's hammer is stolen by Thrym, king of the frost giants, his realm and palace are located in Jotunheim, and Thor and Loki must travel there to get it back. This is another solid bit of world building that makes a lot of sense. The giants are the perennial enemies of the Aesir, so it makes sense that they would have their own stomping.
Except for when they marry them, because apparently that was very frequent. Yeah, I'm still a little weirded out by that. It's kind of cool, though.
It's brought up frequently enough that it's pretty clearly a thing, and considering how much focus is put on Thor battling giants, it's a safe bet that Jotunheim is solidly one of the 9 worlds. A nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there. So we're at 3, or like 20. 3 worlds repeatedly attested in the Poetic Edda, the source we like the most here at OSP. 3 worlds that are similarly discussed and highlighted in the Prose Edda, the source we tolerate because it's kinda all we got. But these 3 are the big ones. Midgard is basically the real world, Asgard is the home of the gods, who are kind of important in this context, and Jotunheim is the home of the giants, the antagonists in the Aesir's current ongoing conflict. No other realm is gonna get that much focus, but there's still a couple that get name-dropped just enough that we can tentatively call them realms in their own right. For instance, Vanaheim is literally the realm of the Vanir. Now, the Vanir are referenced rather infrequently in the Poetic Edda, and are almost exclusively brought up when mentioning how wise they are. However...
Wait, they were infrequent mentions? You know, I probably should have guessed that, considering we just went over the fact that the rest of the realms aren't going to be brought up, so the world about the Vanheim. I just realized that Thor the Dark World might have actual more first-hand information, even if it's just their own fictitious creation, than the initial source of the entire myths and legends. That hurts. Like, that legitimately causes me pain.
The Aesir and Vanir have a tumultuous history. They were at war, and after the Vanir besieged Asgard and broke through their walls, the conflict was eventually ended by an exchange of hostages. The Aesir got the Vanir deity Njord and later his 2 children, Freyr and Freya, and with the conflict over, the Vanir sort of quietly vanished from the narrative. Presumably they went home. This is like
Now, see, that's very fascinating, because this is, again, compared to Marvel knowledge about this mythology, I'm just hurting myself saying this. I'm used to ideas like, yeah, the Vanheim were there, but they failed. And it was a battle, but then they kind of made peace, and it was tempestuous, and like all of that going on, but it was always putting the Asgardians as the victors. And it sounds more like they sued for peace because they lost. Huh. Interesting way to depict that.
Jotunheim, a realm that makes sense to exist independent of the rest because it's technically a bad guy region, or at least it used to be. However, Vanaheim's existence as its own realm is dependent on how separate the Vanir and the Aesir really are, which is one of those super fun things the scholars like yelling.
Our religious system contains various kinds of deities with varying functions. How long before we get into someone saying, yeah, the Vanir were definitely the Greek gods, yeah, And wait, actually someone already said it was Troy. Maybe it's already mentioned.
at each other about because they're functionally just two different flavors of God. Still, it's referenced solidly enough that I think it's likely one of the main 9 realms, and I think it's a pretty uncontroversial pick. Unlike this next one.
Niflheim?
Now we're getting niche. If you've dabbled in Norse mythology before, you've probably heard Niflheim mentioned, like when I did it earlier this video. And you might have also heard somebody mention Hel or Helheim. Today's hot take is that all of those are probably just this realm.
What?
While Niflheim is only mentioned in the Prose Edda and only in the context of the distant past, Niflhel is name-dropped a whole 2 times in the Poetic Edda. In Vafthrud with Nismal, it's described as the home where dead men dwell and is located under the rest of the worlds. And in Baldur's Draumr, Niflhel is specified as the dark realm of Hel, goddess of the dead. But just to confuse matters, the Prose Edda also briefly mentions Niflhel as a location close to, but separate from Hel. Bad dudes go to Hel and then on to Niflhel, which Snorri says is down in the 9th world. This is very good. This suggests that Niflhel isn't just one of the 9 realms, it's the last of the 9 realms. The one
Makes sense that death would be the base of them all, but also, see, that actually is fascinating to me, this part right here.
Very good. This suggests that Niflhel isn't just one of the 9 realms, it's the one in the 9th world.
The weekend there go to Hel, and from her to Niflhel. Huh. This is the Prose Edda, so 1879? You know, that's a pretty long time ago. But considering when everything else was, I was expecting, you know, maybe a less digit there. Like 879 is 1879 compared. I was just ignoring that the entire time. It's like, nah, it can't be right. They can't be right. No, it is. That's so much more recent. No wonder they're not actually going much with the prose version, because it is very much just, that's such a late model. Some of the other ones just writing fan fiction about might actually have more primary knowledge just due to less drift.
This is very good. This suggests that Niflhel isn't just one of the 9 realms, it's the last of the 9 realms, the one at the very bottom. And I'm sure it'll be totally possible to put the rest of these realms in a geographical arrangement that's consistent and makes sense. That doesn't sound like a nightmare at all. And for extra nightmare points, Gylfaginning mentions that when Hel was cast into Niflheim, she was given power over 9 realms. Which 9 realms? Are there 9 more realms? Are there 9 realms in her realm? What is happening anymore? And with that, we've officially exhausted the list of realms I'm even halfway certain about.
That's only the one she's certain about? He's the only one I can think of otherwise with Muspelheim, and that's just because fire giants. Unless that's completely different. And I thought those were mentioned in the creation of Ymir, but maybe those aren't enough mentions in all, because those might actually just be inferences as well.
Whopping 5 of them. But that's ridiculous, I hear you cry. What about Niflheim and Muspelheim? Why'd you have to go and decanonize both Alfheims? And what about Nidavellir? Surely those words didn't just come from nowhere.
I mean, that actually does happen pretty frequently. I mentioned Shakespeare, he does words from nowhere all the time, so that's not entirely weird.
Where the rest of the 9 realms supposed to be? Well, I'm here to not tell you that. Hey, look, when the information is gone, it's gone. I warned you at the beginning this was going to be unsatisfying. But on the plus side, now that we're in the uncharted zone, we can get a little wild with it. So let's start looking through the big ol' maybes. The realms that might be mentioned only once, or the ones that are only implied to exist by oblique references, or are otherwise weird and untrustworthy.
The untrustworthy ones I'm a little hesitant on. But the ones with oblique references, I'm just here going like, literary fun. I know, it's stupid, it's geeky, but these kind of little explorations of what happened, how were they interpreted, what is going on here, and can we infer based on the story moving to see what they added in to make their own version of an already existing lore? How does the fan fiction... Hit a water bottle off screen. Oops. How does the fan fiction of people writing their own version of a myth, because they can, compare to the original one, and can we make the distinction of what they're adding in and what they're drawing from the original to just move forward? And yes, I'm calling it fascism, fashion, and there's the same thing. I know what I said, but I'm calling them that because, frankly, it's fan fiction. It's literally taking something and writing your own version of it because you can. There's usually a lot more reasons for it, and a lot of it may or may not be propaganda, but it's basically fan fiction. So yeah, call a duck a duck. And in this case, the duck sat down and decided to write... I was going to make a My Immortal joke here, but that just pained me too much to even make the comparison. Ugh. There's lines. There's lines. That's my line. Also, for some reason, my camera's deciding to focus on my mic instead of me. Weird.
Starting with... May as well do these as a double feature because they usually show up as a matched set. Niflheim and Muspelheim are not named at all in the Poetic Edda, which as far as I'm concerned is a very bad sign. They're really only featured in the Prose Edda, specifically the Gylfaginning, where they're described as part of the creation story of Midgard. They pre-exist Midgard, with Niflheim representing a world of ultimate cold and Muspelheim a primordial realm of fire and heat. Niflheim's many rivers froze over the northern part of the Ginnunga Gap, while Muspelheim's flames heated the southern part. Where Muspelheim's cinders met Niflheim's ice, they melted and formed the giant Ymir, while a few of the more ambitious Muspelheim sparks finally fulfilled their dreams of becoming big stars by literally becoming stars. After that chunk of creation mythiness is done, Muspelheim and Niflheim are basically never mentioned again. However, these guys are still in the maybe category because they might be implied to exist in the Poetic Edda even if they aren't named. For instance, while Muspelheim is never name dropped in the Poetic Edda, Surtur is, a fire giant who marches on Asgard from the south when Ragnarok comes, wielding a flaming sword and possibly leading the army of Muspel's sons through Mirkwood towards the battle.
Mirkwood? Yeah, because Tolkien stole a lot of names from Norse mythology.
Between Muspel's sons and a general southern vibe, these references to Surtur do imply a fiery Muspel-based realm to the south, but that doesn't mean it's one of the 9 worlds. And of course, Niflheim is never name-dropped in the Poetic Edda, but its portrayal in the Prose Edda is in this weird space of being either totally redundant with or weirdly similar to Niflhel, especially since it's described as either being very close to or containing the gates of Hel's realm. And it's just not clear if they're supposed to be 2 different but similar worlds, or if Niflhel is what Niflheim became post-creation myth, or what. In any case, Niflheim and Muspelheim are only ever explicitly brought up in the Prose Edda, and even then, only in the context of being older than Midgard and contributing to its creation in a transformative primordial clash. This is also the only context in which we find reference to the Ginnunga Gap, or the Gap var Ginnunga, the primordial empty void that Midgard is later built on, and nobody tries to say that the Ginnunga Gap is one of the 9 realms. So essentially, while Niflheim and Muspelheim may have pre-existed Midgard, that doesn't mean they still exist as part of the 9 realms. Anyway, that's the big boys out of the way. Now let's move on.
Those were the big boys? If they were just implied with the prose version, which is... I can see why that would be a wonky choice. And handfuls of mentions by just having similar sounding locations and saying people from a certain area had just had a similar name. If that is the big boys that are not certain but closer, what are the rest of them going to be like? Like, the name happens to be certain. They mentioned it once on this one day. Honestly, it seems like the biggest advantage to saying there's 9 realms is literally just that they said the number 9.
One of the realms that get 1 line each.
Literally 1 line each.
Airier is referenced in the Poetic Edda exactly once in the Volspa, where it is described as the location of a golden hall for Sindri's race, which most likely means the dwarves. Well, hey, that's great. Maybe we found the designated dwarf realm where the dwarves hang out.
And that would also then conflict with the idea that the Dark Elves were also the dwarves, so that would be different, and Sindri might be something completely different.
Whoops. Referenced in exactly the same stanza as Nidavellir, with exactly as much evidence supporting it, Okolnir is described as the location of the mead hall belonging to the giant Brimir. Brimir is pretty much only referenced in the context of his blood being the origin of the dwarves, and it's possible that Brimir is just another name for Ymir, making this even weirder. But the bottom line is, they're in the same stanza, they're listed together, they have exactly as much going on. If Nidavellir is one of the 9 realms, Okolnir is too.
So literally, there's not just 2 different things competing for how the dwarves are created. There's Sindri, and then there's the mead hall that also made the blood that created dwarves. It might have been Ymir, but it might not have been. Then it might have been the Dark Elves, but it might not. I can see why this gets confusing because there's literally no chill here. Hashtag like in God of War.
A location at the base of Yggdrasil, where, according to the Poetic Edda, the Norns live and draw up water to tend the roots of the tree. In the Prose Edda, it's listed alongside Alfheim as a place of great significance to the gods, which means if Alfheim is one of the 9 realms, Urdswell is too.
Wait, Urdswell was its own realm altogether? Hashtag Time Warp? Idvalir?
A key location for the gods that seems separated from Asgard for one key reason. It both predates its construction and survives its destruction. Idavol is the...
Survives the destruction. Can realms even be destroyed here? Because at that point, it almost sounds like, the initial comment I made about kingdoms.
Field where the newly minted gods first meet up to hang out and play games before getting down to business of actually running the world. And it is also the field where the surviving gods gather after Ragnarok. It may not be a world of its own, but it's more distinct from Asgard than Valhalla, Folkvanger, and Alfheim anyway. Speaking of maybe not its own world, but also maybe yes, we have Jarnvidr, literally Ironwood.
I've literally never even heard of this one. The giantess told in iron. It actually just says ironwood. Huh. This one's translated in 1936 though, and this is the Poetic Edda. So that means the Prose Edda translation is actually older. Were these only discovered later, or they just never get translated until later? Oh, I need to just look this up later.
In the Poetic Edda, it's referenced as a spooky realm that's home to a giantess spawning the brood of Fenrir, aka all the supermassive deadly wolves that'll eat the sun and moon and contribute to the overall enshittening of Ragnarok. Despite being another fairly self-contained region that's a little below expected world size, the Prose Edda helpfully describes Jarnvidr as being east of Midgard, which explicitly indicates it is not part of Midgard. A quick name drop from the Poetic Edda, the Volspa describes Nidafjol as the realm below that the Nidhogg flies out from after Ragnarok. Its name literally means the Dark Mountains, which geographically does not narrow things down at all. This could conceivably be a bougie suburb of Niflhel, especially since it's mentioned as being below other worlds, but all we know for sure is it was separate enough to be worthy of its own name, and that means it's worthy of going on the list. Utgardr literally just means outyards, and it's the home of Utgard Loki, the trickster giant that screws with Thor and Loki in a series of impossible challenges. When it's described in the Prose Edda, Thor and Loki have explicitly passed through Jotunheim to get there, and then across an ocean and through a forest. And while
so if they're literally just passing through locations to get there, it does seem like they're less separate planets and more just separate locations on a planet.
it's possible that Jotunheim is a lot longer than we thought, its description makes it sound separate and strange, a mystical otherworld of illusions and sorcery that Thor is later barred from entering for being too scary. And on the subject of things that might or might not be part of Jotunheim, we're fully out of the Eddas now, folks. Gleisisvellir, or the Glittering Plains, is referenced in at least 2 legendary sagas. In the saga of Hervor and Heidrek, Gleisisvellir is described as being part of Jotunheim, and the people who live there.
And the translation she's using here is from 2005. They just keep getting newer. Oh, we have the initial and then the translation. King of Jotunheim, home Grund and his Glasvlir, great worshipper of the old gods. There is... The scholarship on this must be absolutely fascinating to do.
Seem to live forever, never aging or getting sick or sleeping funny and then walking with a limp for 2 weeks. In the saga of Bosi and Heraud, it's name dropped but isn't super focused on, but it is still framed as a magical otherworld with a girl being magically abducted there by a witch who traveled there to stave off her own death. Its framing as a magical semi-earthly paradise separates it from the way the rest of Jotunheim is described, so you could make an argument that despite the framing, it's not really part of that realm and is in fact its own thing. In fact, this might be so much its own thing that it's actually a Celtic transplant, since mythical lands of immortality beyond the sea are a bit of a staple of the folklore in the British Isles. In fact, it's entirely possible that both Gleisisvellir and Utgard are originally concepts from Celtic folklore that the Norse incorporated into their own world building.
And it's entirely possible, not even be an incorporation, it could have been distinctly just going like, hey, they believe this thing over here. Maybe that's the point to it. Let's just say that it's part of us. Because it makes sense. I mean, if they believe it, maybe they know something. We believe this, they believe that. Neat, they're next to each other. Which is an entirely good way to make that point of view. And if I had an entire literary article based on that concept, I would more or less point to these and just say, here are things, here's how they work, here's how I make my point. What you're seeing is literally on the spot literary analysis. And the fact that I'm referencing it all just while watching her video is not the dumbest way to do it. People have done it based on interviews they've done with people who are completely wrong before, but made their own conclusion, then see if they can make them fit to what they're reading. And if that does sound backwards to you, yes, it is, but technically it still works in literary analysis. It doesn't work well, and it shouldn't, but people have done a lot of dumb things there.
And speaking of the sea... And now we enter the realm of the conspiracy board. See, unlike some of these places, there's actually decent evidence that this was a realm of its own. But unfortunately for us, it doesn't have a name. Airier is a Jotun who embodies this...
Wait, oh god, really? Airier, see? Sorry, I play Arknights. I just realized they actually just took this from Norse mythology. I never even realized that. Or once drank the ocean straight. I'm just here to help raise his standards and save the whales.
Sea, and he frequently hosts really banging parties for the Aesir. In the Poetic Edda, the Lokasenna and the Heimskvida both take place at one of Aegir's feasts hosted in his hall. His wife, the goddess Ran, is evidently a bit less sociable than her husband, since while she's also mentioned in the Poetic Edda, she's only really brought up in the context of people drowning. She uses a net, which Loki borrows at least once to capture a dwarf in the shape of a pike, and in the story of Helgi Hundingsbane, a near-drowning experience is described in terms of escaping Ran, and potentially being given to Ran. Plus, in the short story, The Tale of Sarcastic Holly, a poet describes a drowned man tangled in seaweed down in Ran's domain. All this strongly indicates that, much like Hel takes the dishonored dead and Odin and Freya split the forces of the dead who fall in battle, Ran is the goddess who gets the drowned.
Which actually makes a lot of sense considering they were a lot of Vikings at the time, which would be a lot of the people here. I'm not sure of all of them. They had a lot of military seafaring traditions, so it makes sense that this would be a realm. In fact, I'm surprised it's not more mentioned. Although, again, that might be the same issue if anything prior was just destroyed because it was just too obvious. Or maybe they were oral traditions and these just happen to be ones written down.
Dead. One can only hope they aren't floating around in the same place as Aegir's party venue for all time. I can only imagine they'd spoil the vibes. Anyway, while the evidence for this being one of the 9 realms specifically is pretty much non-existent, it is pretty solidly confirmed that there is at least one unique godly domain under the sea. Possibly 2, depending on what you think Aegir's policy is on corpses in the dining room. It also obliquely hints at another possibility, even more annoying than the rest. See, Aegir and Ran have 9 daughters. They represent the ocean waves, and they all have names describing different kinds of wave effects. It's pretty neat. Except how sometimes there are actually 10 names listed.
What?
If the names...
Darling, how many daughters do we have? Enough. Oh my god. It's literally like the happy-go-lucky guy in the yandere. Uvar, Herving, Dufa, Hron, Himingvala, Kongla. Let's go. Bailija, Bara. I can't even see that one end. You know what? I'm going to say something offensive. Blojagata. Those are all words.
Names are listed at all. And really, all those names are just poetic kennings for waves, which means the idea that there are exactly 9 daughters is already shaky and sounds like it might just be poetic convention. And then there's Heimdall, a god born of 9 mothers, who have a nice solid list of 9 names given in the Lay of Hyndla, although it's not actually 100% certain that those 9 giantesses raising an unnamed but mighty god are the same 9 mothers that raised Heimdall. So it's another case where there's supposedly 9, but they aren't really coherently listed that way. And there's a...
Wait, what did they say at the bottom? I think there was a little here. Here is a comprehensive list of Heimdall's nicknames, superpowers, and horse. No, I won't tell you his mother's names. Who's asking? Son, I am of maidens 9. Born, I am of sisters 9. That is a boast.
That way. And there's a lot of other 9s in Norse mythology. We don't even need to look that hard. Odin hung on Yggdrasil for 9 days to receive secret rune knowledge. Odin's ring Draupnir spawns off 8 identical copies every 9 nights. After Thor kills Jormungandr during Ragnarok, he staggers back 9 steps before succumbing to his poison. When Odin is imprisoned in his Grimnir disguise, he breaks loose on the 9th day. The frequency this number appears could suggest that the number had some kind of hidden significance to be unpacked on the conspiracy board. But
honestly, it probably was just a fun little coincidence. People like, ooh, 3 dots, 3 dots, 3 dots, 9! Yeah. People like to make categorizations, which we started at the beginning of the video. That's not even an odd one.
It also represents a slightly worrying alternative possibility.
What?
Is the 9 in 9 realms meant to actually be the integer 9? Or is the number 9 just poetic and religiously significant enough that it gets used in any context where there's a large number of something important? Is it basically just a poetic way of saying a bunch? For all the talk of 9 daughters and 9 mothers and 9 worlds, everyone seems very reluctant to actually list what those 9 are, and 9 is not a prohibitively large number of things to list. Now, admittedly, 9 is also a pretty small number to get the vagueness treatment. People might say they saw like a dozen guys without meaning they actually counted 12 of them, but most non-literal numbers are things like 10,000 or 1,000,000 or 40 days and nights. But when
10,000 or 1,000,000, though, would be a much later comparison. I don't know how well math integrated in this area, so I don't know if that was a thing that would happen. But 9 probably felt like the largest number you can get up until the point of why. I mean, of course, it's not the largest number they could actually get to, of course. People can count still. Their phrasing had words, so they would have numbers and maybe not the same Roman alphanumeric style we have now. I said Roman, but I'm strictly thinking about the Arabic alphabet. Not alphabet. Numerous? I can't speak today. Numbers, that's the word. Wow, my mind is all over the place. But how would the concept of numbers be different than what we have now? How would they consider something big or small? And they're saying a dozen because that's just shorthand for eggs. Half a dozen eggs, baker's dozen eggs, and then you go to different aspects of that, which is all based around food production. So then we get into that as being our catch hand, at least in my general area in America. But in a different culture, at a different time, how much of that is a positive assumption on our end, because this is how we view things here, that they view things the same way, but it might be completely different because they have a different shorthand for what their information is. It's like that previous point I made about how there is context missing. So all of this might actually be very well explained if we had context, but we don't have enough sources to know what the context is, even as an inference. It's literally trying to work back even more information than I realized. It's not just even the Norse mythology. It's how do people think? Is this a shorthand or is this a number? This is fascinating to me.
When it comes to place names, even single-digit numbers can get a bit shaky. Consider the 7 seas. If you tallied up all the bodies of water that had at one point been on a list of the 7.
The Sea of Fars, Lowry, Harkand, Bay of Bengal, Strait of Mancala. I don't even know many of these.
You make it well into the double digits, even if some of those are just streams or tributaries or straits or gulfs or whatever.
Dead Sea?
And the thing is, if the significance of 9 in Norse mythology is really just a nice poetic way to say a moderately impressive amount of something, then trying to identify and codify the 9 realms is a fundamentally losing battle. If there was ever a definitive list, we don't have it. And it evidently wasn't a priority for the writers of either Edda to list it if they had it. And it's very possible that these writers left that question so conspicuously unanswered because they didn't have an answer either. Yggdrasil holds 9 worlds, and these are some of them. That's all the stories needed, so that's all we got. Personally, I kind of doubt there were ever just 9, but it is very fun to yell about.
Okay, this was way more of a complete literary geek out than I was expecting. I love every second of this. I wish this were one of the diatribes instead of just a summarizing, because I want to get into the nitty-gritty of why they believe this. How are the comprehensive voices different? What are the secondary sources that drew from this but might have had other information because things were around at the time that are old enough that that is a possibility, but not so new that the translation is very biased? What are we missing? This is so cool. Normally this would be, I say, well, what if there were like various burial chambers? And there are burial chambers in this area. There's cairns and ways to do that. But it's a much more wet place than if you had a burial chamber in, say, a desert, like in Egypt, because dry things just seem to dry out rather than get eaten by mold or other random bacteria. And that's just if they're preserved, and just everything about this is just like saying, hey, here's a lot of cool things. Where's the treasure hunt? Because there is someone out there hunting treasure of just the knowledge of what's going on, what's in the story. Hell, I'm not even going to be surprised if someone has, hey, there's the Atlantis of the Norse. Which admittedly would probably be Iceland if I think about it, honestly. Yeah. But still, it's just so cool. I love this. It's literally just treasure hunting for human stories of our mythologies that we've lost because we had them and we need to find them again. And it'd be so cool. It's just for the pure enjoyment, and the speculation is fascinating. This is why I was an English major. This kind of stuff is just fun. It's just a pile of sugar, and I'm just told to go straight at it. And I love this. As you can tell, I don't resist saying no to a pile of sugar. Yeah. More importantly, though, this is just really good. I don't know what I'm going to do next when it comes to various overly sarcastic production works because, again, decision overload. There is so much they've done, and I want to see it all. If you got something you want me to check out, let me know. If there's a playlist that I should check out, let me know. Or if there's some random shit they've done that is really good and I could check it out immediately, let me know, because I want suggestions. For anyone who does, thanks. I'll probably try and get to everything, but just there's so much, man. I love this. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.